So I think this is kind of a handy definition. Improvement then is change with direction, sustained over time, that moves entire systems, raising the average level of quality and performance while decreasing the variation. And people talked about the variation among units. The between classroom differences are greater than the differences between schools. I mean, that's extraordinary, isn't it? That between class variation that Peter Hill all those years and Carmel Cavola talked about. So we need to try and get people working in teams, designing curriculum together, assessing and moderating work together. Richard Olmore talks about there are only 3 ways to improve learning and performance. Increase the knowledge and skill of teachers. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But that's absolutely fundamental. And it does require being in the classroom. There is no better way than through feedback. The powerful thing for improving any human's performance is through feedback. So what is your on-site professional learning program? How does it look like? What quality is it? Is there an action research project that teachers are engaged in together? And it could be a whole school one. It could be a team-based one. Changing the content. Richard Elmore and others very clearly, he has an economy of language that I think is really helpful, is that task determines performance. If you give students low quality curriculum with low levels of cognitive demand, you know that bottom end of the Bloom's taxonomy, they will produce low-end work. You need to have scaffolded work that helps students move up that hierarchy of cognitive demand, ensuring that there's a very clear understanding and agreement and consistency around what it means to teach the content that's being taught, whether it's in literacy or numeracy, whether it's in a subject in a secondary school, that there's a very clear, documented and viable curriculum that pushes students to higher order thinking and makes some metacognitive demand upon them to think about their thinking, to assess their own work, and to alter the relationship of the student and teacher to the content. The unique thing about being a teacher that's different to being a scout leader or a netball team leader is that it's the student and the teacher in the presence of content. So it has to be worthwhile, relevant, meaningful content that's designed to reach them at their point of intervention, that zone of proximal development, where there's sufficient challenge and support for each child. And the quality of this relationship between the student and the teacher in the presence of content is absolutely crucial too. To know the learner at depth so that you can help them make progress. And it's about, over time, releasing more autonomy and freedom to students and independence in their learning. Now that's often misunderstood. You know, we kind of tend to fall into either ors in education. It's either, you know, cooperative inquiry-based learning, minimal control over here, and then teacher-directed didactic over here. The work of John Hattie talks about directed or quality instruction. That's about carefully scaffolded work with clear instructions where the teacher is an authoritative voice in the process, but allows increasing levels of independence and autonomy, particularly as students mature and grow through the stages of schooling, so that they're able to take charge of their learning. They learn independent habits of learning. They learn how to learn, is absolutely crucial. So it's a nice little triangle or tripod. And we need to, if you work on one, you have to work on them all. Doesn't matter where you start, it is going to impact upon all of them. So if you're asking teachers to engage in more complex content, you need to skill them up. But if you have high-level teacher skill teaching low-level content, teachers get disaffected and bored as well with the work. So it's really important that you look at that relationship. These are the very significant cultural shifts that are taking place across the Western world, at least, in education as it becomes a profession. And it's moving from private practice, my classroom, to a public good. You know, when you're in the classroom with a group of students, you're not there on your own. You think you're there on your own, even if you're team teaching, but you're in there with the parent. I mean, the child came from somewhere. They have a family. And most families care deeply. even parental behaviours that we might find outside of our norm. They are vested in their children in some ways. And so you're in there on behalf of others, loco and parentis. And so this need to deprivatise practice, and particularly in secondary schools, where the teacher goes into the classroom, draws up the drawbridge, floods the moat, calls on volunteers to get into the turrets with the arrows, heat the oil, and it's their private domain and they can do whatever they like. And don't tell me what to do. You know, I'm an experienced teacher, and all of that fandangled stuff about open learning spaces and cooperative learning, well, you know, we did that in the 70s and it didn't work.